Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I step out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good morning, listeners. It's a lovely day here in suburban Chicago. It's slightly overcast with hints of blue peeking through the clouds. There are sparrows everywhere. As I mentioned before, we had a boon of sparrow births around here this year, and it is a lovely day to go out on a walk. Not too sunny, not too hot, very comfy. Well, I was looking at the recent episodes I played and I realized it's been a minute since I talked about new games I played, so I thought it was time for another Board Game Espresso triple shot. That's right. Board Game Espresso Triple Shot is a mini review episode in which I talk about 3 games I've played recently for the first time, and I give them each like a 5-minute mini review. Of course, having only played these games once, I don't really know them well enough to actually do a review, but it's more just a first impressions kind of deal. I also usually pick out one game that I've dusted off recently to talk about as well. So from that regard, why don't we get started? So the first game I want to talk about, I did mention on the Top of the Stack episode a little bit as a game I had tried, and that is Chicken. Chicken is a very light, and I played this game twice actually. We played 2 rounds of it. The first round was just, we played regular Chicken. The second round we played Chicken along with the Egg Explosion, or the Egg Expansion, which included a couple more dice. Chicken is a very light dice rolling push your luck game, sort of in the neighborhood of something like Zombie Dice, where of course Zombie Dice has a push your luck mechanism where you're trying not to bust. The same is true of Chicken. In Chicken, you are rolling a variety of different dice that have chicken and a fox and a dog, a couple other things on them, and eggs. And the idea is that you can set aside some dice, re-roll others, and you get to keep rolling as many times as you like until you choose to stop or until you bust. When you stop, you get to claim points based on the combination of dice you rolled, and if you bust, of course, you don't get to claim those dice. The interesting difference of this game to most others is that when you stop, you pass along the dice you stopped with to the next player. So if you're pushing your luck to add more dice to the pool, you then pass all of those dice on to the next player. So if someone else has a particularly successful turn, they might pass you a huge pile of dice and you could immediately roll and bust, which is an amusing thing. It would be kind of annoying as a potential thing to happen if it were in a more serious or complicated game, but in a game as simple as Chicken is, it ends up just being an amusing twist to have the potential of busting on your first roll. I guess that's actually true of something like Zombie Dice as well. You could bust on your first roll of that game as well. So Chicken, the Egg Expansion comes with a couple other dice that you can add. One of them is a dog that will chase away foxes. I don't remember what the other one is, but they're both additional dice that add a little bit more to the game. Just give it a little bit extra pizzazz. The game comes in a little cylinder with a bag, and it sort of reminds me of Zombie Dice in terms of form factor, although it does have a little mat that you can spread out to play on. This is an excellent example of a cute little game that if you don't have any games like this in your collection or you're looking for a new one, it's a great one to break out for a few minutes. It's very light, easy to teach to non-gamers or new gamers, and has an experience that is easy to learn and fun to replicate. And it's short enough that if the dice aren't going your way, you don't feel too bad about it because the game's over by the time you start to resent them. Then you can start over and reset your luck with the dice, because we all know that's how dice work. Not a lot more to say about it. The art and design is really cool. It's a sort of color palette of oranges, yellows, and reds, and the iconography on the box and the instruction book and whatnot is pretty interesting as well. So from a design perspective, it's pretty nice looking. Chicken was designed by Scott Almes and is published by Keymaster Games. The art is credited to the Carpenter Collective, which I presume is a group of people who do art for board games. Worth checking out if you get a chance. That was published in 2023. Next up we have Picture Perfect. Picture Perfect is a game from 2020. I remember it was all the rage at Gen Con that year, which was the big COVID year. The designer is Anthony Louveau, and the art is done by Ronnie Libor and several other people. I just included the name of the first person on the list. I didn't want to read all the names on the list. Picture Perfect is an interesting game in premise, it's a really cool premise. So there are a series of cards, there's a whole bunch of them, and they get shuffled up and dealt out, and these are clue cards. And what they are cards that give you points or they are cards that explain what different characters want. And your job is to put characters into a tableau in which you are going to take a picture. And the idea of the tableau is you take a picture with your camera on your phone to score. So you have these little standees and a little table, and you have this grid on the floor, and each of the cards depicts a different one of the characters in the tableau. And you all have the same set of characters. You all have the same set of clue cards. And the idea is like one character will want to be somewhere on the left side of the board. Another character will want to be next to this other particular character. Another character won't want to be by any characters of this type. And so each person has things they want or things they don't want, and sometimes things they want and don't want. And you get to see a couple of the characters, and then through a sort of system of trading cards, you get to show other people. You would trade cards with some of those people, some of the other players, so that they see some combination of the cards that you saw before. So sometimes you end up getting back the cards that you got before. Sometimes you get to see new things. Sometimes you can do a little bit to hide one of the cards from other players. But the other thing about it is that you all have the same group of people. You're all building the same tableau of these little standees in a carefully arranged situation. But the thing is, when you get to scoring, you score each figure that you have in your tableau. So there is an element of, as you arrange figures in the tableau, you score points for them or lose points for them. But if there's a character you can't particularly well fit, you don't have to put it in the tableau. The trick is, once you put it in, you have to keep it in. So you can't take it back out. Like if you put a character in without knowing what they want, and then you find out that what they want is going to ruin a lot of your other plans, well, too bad, you can't take them back out. You have to leave them in. So there's an interesting element of pushing your luck in terms of deciding when to add a new figure to the tableau so that you can accomplish other goals, but also score points. It's an interesting game with a clever set of interrelated scoring conditions that often involve choosing some things that for good and some things for bad, and then leaning into that or moving around. A good example of that, I think, is at least the way the scoring conditions work, something like Point Salad, which has a whole bunch of different scoring conditions, a lot of which overlap, some of which are oxymoronic, or that's not the word I'm looking for, counterproductive, or cancel each other out. And what you're trying to do as a person arranging the photograph is get all of them. My favorite ones, there are a few photos or a few people who, depending on the card you draw, want to be seen, but they don't want you to see their face, or they want you to see their face but not their hands. And so part of what you're doing is physically arranging the standees in a way that when you take a picture, you can see them, but you only see them in the way that is required for their rules. And of course, there are light rules about where you have to hold the camera in order to accomplish this photo. So it's a neat idea. It's the sort of game that I would play occasionally if somebody got it out. Not probably the kind of game I would purchase for full price. I did get to play a friend's copy, which was cool. And if I found this at a thrift store, I would definitely get it. I might even pick it up used for 10 or 15 bucks because it's just a neat experience. And so it's the kind of game that would be fun to play once a year or to play with people who haven't played it before because it's just unique. Yeah, so that's where I sit in terms of my interest in acquiring it. But it is an interesting experience if you get a chance to play it. That's picture perfect. I believe they also have added an expansion. There's a Sherlock Holmes expansion that involves solving a murder mystery using the clues. I don't really know how that works, but it sounds pretty neat, and I would like to try that at some point. So that game came out in 2020. Again, the designer was Anthony Nouveau, and it was published by Arcane Wonders in the United States. I did get to dust off one game that I wanted to talk about a little bit here. I think some of this may overlap with the discussion I did on the Top of the Stack episode, because I believe that I talked about this game there, or possibly in another podcast since then, maybe my When to Keep a Game podcast. Anyhow, this is Nexus Ops, Nexus Ops is a game it was originally published by Avalon Hill in 2005. It was republished by Fantasy Flight sometime between then and now, and then has been out of print for a long time. I heard rumblings that there is a new edition being developed, and that's going to be published on Kickstarter, and I can see why. And I'd be happy to talk about the game and what it was. It was designed by Charlie Catino, who I looked and he did a little bit more design work, but not a ton, and also Steve Kindell. And Steve Kindell actually has done a lot of design work. Most prominently, he worked for Fantasy Flight, and there's a bunch of games that on his Board Game Geek page, he says he had significant input on, and then there's a bunch of games where he's listed as the designer. So lots of game output from him, particularly from Fantasy Flight. He had a big role in Star Wars X-Wing and other things. So Nexus Ops is a very aggressive area control game in which players are trying to gather points, and by taking control of this mining planet that is the base of the game. The way the game works, each player controls a faction that is a mining corporation who is trying to mine this valuable material. Let's call it unobtainium, because that's funny. And they are actually doing battle with other mining corporations that are also trying to mine that same material from this planet. The indigenous species of the planet are easily manipulated with technology. And so the different units that you have are actually captured wildlife from the planet that you're using to compete with the other mining companies. You also have your human engineers who are actually doing the mining, and they also do some fighting. The gameplay mechanisms are relatively simple. Basically, you just have these units and you get to spawn some each round, and then you are moving them into combat with other players. Each time you lose a combat, you get one of these cards that gives you an advantage later. Each time you win a combat with another player, you get a point. So you are in combat with the other players, and you're doing it through very aggressive interactions. Each round you can spend resources that you've gathered to generate new troops, which you then put on the board and move into combat or move into defensive spaces. The combat is really simple. The way it works is the units all have varying power from 1 to 6, and that power determines when they go in the battle and what die they roll. And generally the level 6 creature rolls a d6. I mean, they're all rolling a single side die, but it's what do they need to hit. The level 6 creature rolls, and as long as it doesn't roll a 1, it kills 1 unit of your opponent's people. Now, if you both have one or more of those units, you roll at the same time and they each kill. So you could have 2 equal sized units kill each other. But generally, the other player is going to pick something weaker to kill with the idea of not giving up their best unit. And then each lesser powered unit gets to go, and they have a lower chance of hitting. So there's some that hit only on a 5 or only on a 2 or better, some that hit on 3 or better, some that hit on a 4 or 5, or even the weakest units only hit on a 6. And so you go back, you go through the whole line once, and then if there's one army left on the board without the other, then they gain control of that space, which sometimes will mean that they can gain control of a mining facility, which would let them gain minerals. And also, if you win the battle, then you get to take a victory point card. And again, the game only goes to 10 points, so it actually plays relatively quick. This is by definition a sort of knife fight in a phone booth game. I played it once a long time ago. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 years dusty. And I thought it was pretty clever at the time, but I didn't really explore it. Well, in the 7 years since, I've grown less interested in this kind of game, not more. So having played it this time, I was sort of like, well, I don't think I need to play this again, or at least I don't need it in my collection. So I have passed it along to a friend who will make better use of it. Nonetheless, if that sounds like your kind of game, do give it a try. It is well made, and it does what it's intended to do very well. It's just not my cup of tea. That is Nexus Ops. I was playing the Fantasy Flight version designed by Charlie Catino and Steve Kindell, and art by Christopher Burdett and many other people. So the last new game I want to talk about is Inventions, The Evolution of Ideas. This is the newest Vital Lacerda game. It delivered sometime in the last few months. It is marked as a 2024 game. Now, I have a couple different friends who are Vital Lacerda heads, so it was fun to be able to join them and get this one played. The this kind of game is, of course, a huge overlap of interconnected systems. And while I really like this one, actually, I found it easier to put all the pieces in my head in a coherent way than either Weather Machine or something like The Gallerist, which you all know I didn't really enjoy The Gallerist. I found this one made a lot more sense to me. Something about the narrative of the world and how the different actions can be explained narratively really worked well for me. So I was able to understand what the game is trying to have me do pretty well. It is a very intricate game with lots of overlapping pieces. I don't even want to try to explain how the game works, except to say it is a world map, and the idea is you are evolving a civilization through time. So you start with very simple things, and over time, ideas are developed, and then they become public domain, and other people can build on them. But there is an interesting middle ground where somebody creates an idea, and then they're the only one who has access to it for a little while. Or you can get access to it, but you have to pay for it, or pay them for it, with an action, which, as in all of these games, the actions are very limited, and action efficiency is the key to good play. The art and design was, as always, very good. Ian O'Toole has a very specific style for Vital Lacerda games, and I thought it fit that really well. If you like his style of game, particularly something like, I see it as kind of a cross between the opulence of Weather Machine and the tight simplicity of Lisboa in terms of the design aesthetic. So it definitely feels of a piece of these other systems. And I think it's one of the more legible games or more comprehensible games. Now, I don't know if that's just because the theme fits better for me and I was able to make narrative sense of it, or I actually read the whole rule book before the game. Like, I sat down and read the whole rule book, which I will confess I haven't always done for other games. And I think I often rely on a video if someone's going to be doing a teach. And I probably would be better to read the rule book, because it really doesn't take that long. This was a big rule book and it took me a half hour, 45 minutes. So, and I've played enough games now that I'm able to comprehend a rule book in ways that I probably couldn't have 10 years ago or 5 years ago even. Not a ton to say about it because I don't want to go deep into mechanisms. I don't think that helps make you decide if you want to play this or not. If you think it sounds interesting, definitely check out some videos of gameplay. If you've never played a Vital Lacerda game, I think this one's probably as approachable as any. I would probably put this and Lisboa at the top of my list for games to try. Now, I've heard Kanban is incredible, and I haven't played that one, so I would like to try that at some point. But generally, I really like this one, and I think it's worth checking out if you get a chance. That's Inventions, The Evolution of Ideas from 2024, designed by Vital Lacerda, with graphic design and art by Ian O'Toole, published by Eagle Gryphon Games this year. Well, those are some new to me games that I've played recently. What games have you tried recently? Head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and share your thoughts on that. I'd love to hear them. Otherwise, I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye. The game is over when somebody gets 10 points. So there's a real distinct focus that involves, sorry, there's a cardinal just really chirping up a storm on a branch that I'm walking by, and I'm finding it distracting.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.